40 years ago, the term middle class referred to Americans who had successfully obtained a version of the American dream. That is, a steady income from one or two earners, a home, and security for the future. It meant the ability to save and acquire assets. Now, it mostly means the ability to pay your bills on autopay and pay off debt. The stability that once characterized the middle class, that made it such a desired and aspirational rank of American existence, has been hollowed out. Basic costs are taking up bigger chunks of monthly middle class paycheck. In 2019, the middle class was spending about $4,900 a year on out-of-pocket healthcare costs. More middle and high-income people than ever are renting and spending more than 30% of their income on rent, particularly in expensive metro areas. Then, there's the truly astronomical price of childcare. In Washington state, for example, which ranks 9th in the US for childcare costs, care for an infant averages just over $25,000 a year, or 35.5% of the median family income. Many middle-class households try to figure out what expenses they have to cover immediately with cash and what can be put on a credit card, financed, or delayed in some fashion. In March 2020, household debt hit $14.3 trillion, the highest it has ever been since the 2008 financial crisis, when it reached $12.7 trillion. In the first quarter of 2020, the average loan for a new car was a record-breaking $33,000, with an average monthly payment of $569. And then there's a student loan debt, which for Americans currently total $1.6 trillion. Not everyone has student loan debt, but among those who do, many with degrees in jobs that seemingly place them in the middle class, the average debt load is about $33,000, with the average monthly payment of $393. So why don't middle class people curb their spending? At the heart of this question is the rather surprising issue of the American middle class identity and psychological social wreckage that comes with losing it. If you grew up poor and became middle class, there's great bitterness in reversing that status. If your parents worked years to enter the middle class, falling from it is often accompanied by great shame. There's also the difficulty of significantly shifting your family's consumption patterns. Once set, many find it impossible to change their own expectations for vacations, activities, and schooling. Why? Because the middle class is spectacularly bad at talking honestly about money. Readily available credit facilitates our worst habits and our most convenient lies. It is the middle class people, or people who still cling to the middle class identity even if they've risen above it or fallen out of it, who don't know how to talk about money. They don't know how to talk about it with their peers or their parents or their children, and sometimes not even with their partners. We are so obsessed with defending our middle class identity by defining ourselves as not poor, not working class, regardless of our debt load or the ease with which you could fall into financial ruin. So many are so obsessed with defining themselves as not poor that they can't fight with the spending habits that would actually prevent them from becoming so. The middle class only started to hollow out over the past 20 years. Back in 1960, the personal saving rate was 11%. In 1990, it was 8.8%, and by 2000, it had dropped to 4.2%, before eventually hitting a low of 3.6% in 2007. That number grew in the aftermath of the Great Recession of 2008, peaking at 12% in 2012, before falling again as consumers gained more confidence in spending. This is because consumer confidence does not mean more savings. It means that people with access to credit are confident about using it, and low interest rate discourage savings. More people are retiring with debt or unable to retire at all, or coming out of retirement to pay off their debt. In 2016, the median debt for a household headed by someone 65 or older was $31,300, which is more than 4.5 times what it was in 1989. These debts come not only from mortgages, but also student loans taken for their children or for themselves when they went back to school, or credit card debt trying to cover costs when they were out of work. For the top earners in our society, wealth and assets reproduce wealth and assets. For the hollow middle class, debt reproduces more debt. The major difference between the American middle class and the poor is that one group began life with access to credit and had just enough support and funds to keep accessing it. And that is how you get the hollow middle class. A bunch of people who are terrified of being poor, have no idea how to talk with others about money, and have no political will to speak for the changes that would alter their position. The more we insist on hiding the economic realities of the middle class existence, the harder it is to muster the political and social might to actually confront income inequality. We continue to think of our struggles as personal and shameful and our responsibility alone. But what if these are symptoms of a systemic failure? The walls are closing in as the division between income and expenses continues to grow. It is difficult to say where the system will break, but it will break if we don't do something about it.